And for those who are just joining us, we're getting more updates in the trial of Christopher Schurr. The judge has just let everyone know in the courtroom that the jury has not come back with a verdict. Now, this means that the jury will continue to deliberate, and that's because the defense did ask for a motion of a mistrial. She denied that motion, saying that the jury had not been deliberating for that long. You remember, they started yesterday afternoon and have been deliberating since then, and she said that not enough time has passed for them to essentially have a hung jury, and so she has now asked the jury to go back into deliberations and continue to work together to reach a verdict. She read new directions and instructions regarding the continuation of deliberating after not coming to a verdict, saying that she wants them to return and resume their deliberation. Mentioned to them that it has not been that long for them to not come to a conclusion together, and that they all must agree on a verdict, whatever that verdict that is. And she said she wants them to continue to talk with others and listen to other jurors to help them come to an agreement. Again, this could possibly be one of the four outcomes we talked about yesterday. Obviously, they're going to work to hopefully not have a hung jury, but that obviously is an option. I want to bring in our experts, Tanya and Andrew. Tanya, Andrew, what is your reaction? A lot of people have been holding their breath for a verdict, and sounds like we haven't gotten one just yet. I'll start with you, Andrew. Is this typical? Were you expecting this, or is this a surprise?
I'm not surprised, especially given the nature of the case. It's not. We would say it's not uncommon to have a hung or a deadlocked jury. The judge did give the jury the instruction that, look, it's not just done. You're going to go back, and you guys have to try to do this. I mean, think about it from the court's perspective. It's like, look, if you guys are just like, if you could just talk a little bit longer, someone else in the community is going to have to come in and try and judge this case, and it's going to take up a tremendous amount of resources. And so you guys should try to resolve whatever differences you have and come to a verdict. At the same time, the judge is also telling them that, look, if you've got a strong conviction one way or the other, we're not asking you to set aside a strong conviction that you might have. And so it's a delicate situation. I would say that it's uncommon from the standpoint that it's not typically how juries go, but it's common enough that the courts deal with it on a regular basis.
And Tanya, I'd love to hear from you. You actually talked with us about a hung or deadlocked jury yesterday. Are you surprised that this has happened at this point in the trial?
Well, the idea of a jury being deadlocked or hung is not an uncommon phenomenon. However, I'm a little surprised that with just this short amount of time deliberating that they've sent a note to the judge that they're deadlocked. There was a lot of expert testimony for them to go through in this particular case, and that really surrounded the main issue in the trial. So I thought that they would at least deliberate through the rest of the day and perhaps reach a verdict tomorrow or Thursday. So the concept of a hung jury, not surprised, not uncommon. That it was this soon into the deliberations is a little surprising.
Do you think that maybe indicates how difficult it is for these jurors to make this decision? Like you said, it's basically only been a full day comparing all the hours that they deliberated. Does that give us an indication that this verdict might not come as easy as some may think it could have?
I certainly think so. I mean, this is a profound case in the sense of what's at stake here, right? And a lot of people had formed opinions before this trial even started. And I'm not suggesting the jurors had, but I'm just saying this case was pending for 3 years, and certainly within the community, a lot of opinions were formed. And so there are a lot of eyes on this, and as you said, we've all been waiting sort of anxiously to know what the jury will do. But that they came to this point so quickly indicates to me that there are some people on the jury that have some pretty strong convictions on what the outcome should be. So whether continued deliberations will help them reach a unanimous verdict, or whether it will further divide them and continue on to a deadlocked jury, is yet to be seen.
Andrew, I want to also ask you about the timing. We've only really seen a day fully full of deliberations. I just wonder, is there a possibility that they could come back tomorrow again and say, listen, we are still deadlocked, we can't come to a conclusion, or should we be expecting them to deliberate a couple more days before they come to a conclusion?
Well, there's no way anyone could ever know that. I was involved with a case very early on in my career where the jury was deliberating, and they had deliberated all the way till about 4:30 on a Friday, and they said that they wI was, as I was watching the jurors leave the courtroom, it became obvious to me who the holdout was. And then about 15 minutes later, they came back out and they had a unanimous verdict at that point in time. And so it could be short. It's in that particular instance, it was just like 10 minutes, or it could go on for a couple of days and they could still be deadlocked. So we have no idea what's going on inside that jury room, and it's designed to be that way. And so we don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see.
I also, Andrew, want to talk to you about that motion. We just saw the defense put another motion for a mistrial, and the judge immediately denied that motion. Can you kind of walk us through it? It seemed like it was a quick reaction to what happened and a quick reaction by the judge to say, no, they need to keep deliberating.
Yeah, that's just again, if you remember us talking about standard motions practice, that it's motions that are made routinely. That was one of those types of motions. They're just doing that to preserve the issue for appeal.
And Tanya, I want to kind of ask you about the prosecution defense of where they stand now, with whatever could happen. I'm sure maybe they were possibly expecting this to happen, but as a lawyer in this situation, do you sit back and just wait for the jury, or do you start thinking about what your next moves are, depending of whatever decision the jury comes out with?
Well, certainly as a former defense lawyer, while the jury is deliberating, it's one of the most agonizing periods of the trial, just waiting for the jury to come back. But certainly because you're representing someone accused of a crime, you are obviously thinking next steps. What if the jury acquits? What do we do from that perspective? What do we do if the jury convicts? Because if there is a conviction, then there is a whole nother side of the legal system that's going to kick into gear, and that's called the sentencing phase, and that has all sorts of implications. And my immediate concern when a client is convicted as a defense lawyer is trying to keep them out on bond if they have successfully been on bond the entire time the case was pending. So you start strategizing that, you start thinking about how will we handle sentencing, and as Andrew has mentioned several times in our conversations, you're also thinking about what you would need to do for appeal.
And Andrew, I also wanted to ask you, from your experience as well, what do you do in a situation like this?
Well, mostly it's you sit there and you are on pins and needles the entire time, and there's literally nothing you can do as the lawyer when you're just waiting for a verdict to come in. It can be exceptionally frustrating. It's frustrating from the standpoint that you put all this effort and energy into it, and goes for both sides. This isn't just the defense. The prosecutor has to sit there. Typically, they got somebody that's waiting there in case something comes up, and so both sides have put so much into this, and just the thought that it's not going to be done, that you might have to do it all over again. That is just one of the hardest parts of being a trial attorney in a situation like this.
And, we heard the judge say to the jury, you need to go back and continue deliberating. Can she only do this once? Can she do this multiple times? I mean, how many times can she say, no, you need to keep talking before it ends up being a true hung jury?
Well, the judge has absolute discretion over her own court, and so from a practical standpoint, it's probably only going to be one or two times. But I think from a theoretical legal standpoint, the judge could keep ordering that as long as the judge at a later time could articulate why the judge was doing that.
And Tanya, I want to ask you about bond. A lot of people have asked us, if Schurr is convicted, would he immediately go to jail? What happens in this situation?
Well, I hate to give you the lawyerly answer and say it depends. I think a lot of it is going to depend on if there is a conviction, what the conviction is for. I would anticipate it's very common on a murder charge upon conviction for a judge to remand the defendant to custody. And one of the theories behind that is that a murder conviction carries a heavy sentence, and the individual then they can start serving their sentence while they're waiting for the sentence hearing. But also at that point, then the viewpoint of the defendant's threat to the community or as a flight risk changes. And I'm not talking about Schurr in particular, I'm talking just in general. If the jury convicts of the lesser charge, manslaughter, I think that gives Judge Mims a lot more discretion on whether to continue Mr. Schurr on bond. And obviously, if he is acquitted, he will need to be processed. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. If he's acquitted, he walks out the front door because he's been on bond this whole time. So he would go home with his loved ones.
We're going to be wrapping up this stream pretty soon, but I just want to get both of you all's final thoughts on this. I'll start with you, Tanya. For people who are watching and once again finding themselves on the edge of their seats, waiting for this verdict to come out, what would you tell them in this situation?
Well, I'd tell them, really the jury has not been deliberating that long. This was a week-long trial, full days every day, and it was a very hard-fought trial on both sides. So right now, even though the jury indicated they were deadlocked, they've been doing what they're supposed to be doing in that jury room. They're deliberating, they're talking about the evidence, they're reviewing the evidence, and considering what the verdict would be. So what I would say to the audience is continue to be patient, let the jury system do what it's supposed to so that those 12 individuals can reach a verdict that's appropriate for this particular case.
And Andrew, for you as well, what are your final thoughts to people watching this trial?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I was quite surprised that we are having this request by the jury telling the judge that they're deadlocked. It's pretty early. I was expecting deliberations to go more or less another day, just given the tremendous amount of evidence that they have to go through. And so the fact that they've come to the judge right away almost seems to me that maybe there's some personalities in that jury room that just have decided that their feet are set and they're not going to move from it. And the other jurors are like, well, okay, then they don't want to waste their time if some people in there are, have a firm position and aren't going to budge from it. And so I think that given what has transpired already, if they come back with another just stating that they're deadlocked, I would expect at that point in time the judge would then grant a mistrial request.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens for the rest of the trial. Tanya, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us again today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to be concluding our stream this afternoon, as it could take days to deliver a verdict in this case, but we will be ready with crews both inside and outside the courthouse the moment the verdict is being read. You can hear the verdict live on 13 Plus and watch our coverage from all 6 days of the trial so far, as well as an episode of On the Docket with Callie Lichter, which takes you through the entire timeline of events ahead of this trial. All of that is right now on 13 Plus.